Thank you all very much for joining us today on the the sixth commemoration of the Yazidi genocide. I want to thank the international and Yazidi audience for staying with us, viewing this important commemoration with us. As many of you know, in 2014 and onward, Daesh, ISIS members committed the most sickening crimes against the Yazidi people, rape of young children, mass murders, an actual slave trade in this century of our Yazidi women and girls and children. And then later, they went home. Those who were not killed by airstrikes or in combat just returned to their previous lives, like nothing happened. I'm talking about the Omaimas, the Tahas who are in Germany, or the Samantha al-Hassanis here in America, and the thousands and thousands of ISIS members in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Europe. They believed and probably still believe that crimes against the Yazidi community have no consequences. It was like a holiday for them, while it was unspeakable hell and misery for our people. This is the 74th genocide, but this time Yazidis say it is enough, and I'm speaking about myself, my organization, and every single Yazidi organization and activist out there. And I swear to God that we will never stop until we have justice. And if you are a Daesh member, an ISIS member who raped our Yazidi women, our Yazidi girls, or killed one of our people, and you thought that you can just go back home to Ba'aj, to Mosul, to Hawija, or you can hide in Turkey, or you can go back to Germany or France or the UK and continue your lives. But you are wrong. We will never stop, never ever, until we find you and bring you to justice. I am having this event, this commemoration, live broadcasted simultaneously into Arabic on Facebook. And I hope that Daesh people hear all of this. We are coming for you, every one of you, and now you will be the hunted ones, because 73 times our people have been targeted and attacked, and we could never fight back or bring the perpetrators to justice, but not this time. This time, the 74th genocide, we will find you and you will face justice for what you have done. Let the word spread in the communities where ISIS members came from, in the Middle East and in Europe. If it takes 2, 5, 10, 20, 50 years, we will find you and we will hold you to account for your disgusting actions against our people, the Yazidi people. I want to thank all of the distinguished guests for being with us today. It is a very, very emotional day for all the Yazidis. Your work is incredibly valuable to our community. And I thank you for your solidarity on this day. You are the force of humanity and justice, and the Yazidis have put our hope in your professional ability to fight for justice, accountability, and fairness in the aftermath of this genocide. Mr. Karim Khan is one of our panelists. He is the UN Assistant Secretary General and the head of UNITAD, which is in charge of investigations of the ISIS crimes. He is a distinguished international lawyer and Queen's Counsel in the United Kingdom. ASG Karim Khan, the floor is yours.
Well, Pari, thank you so much. It is really an honor to be invited to stand shoulder to shoulder with you, the Yazidi people, and indeed humanity today, the 6th anniversary of the commencement of hell for so many innocent Yazidi men, women, and children. It is a hell, unfortunately, that has not stopped, because even though Daesh has been defeated territorially, we have seen so many families that I've met that are still wondering where on earth are their children, where are their daughters, where are their mothers, where are their fathers or brothers buried. So I'm proud on behalf of UNITAD to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. And I also take the opportunity, Pari, to applaud your own work, your own advocacy, your insistent determination. This is really a hallmark, I think, of the Yazidi people, that whatever the struggle, whatever the mountain however high it seemed, that you have not lost hope, that a day of reckoning will come in which the whole world recognized in a court of law that each and every one of your lives mattered, that it mattered then and it matters today, and justice and the rule of law is one way in which we can help collectively ensure that we expose the ideology of Daesh and we can prevent it occurring again. In the 22 months that UNITAD has been on the ground in Iraq, the team has been very active. We've been helping the Iraqi authorities with exhumations, 18 exhumations so far. We've been collecting digital evidence in terms of cell phone call data records of Daesh members, particularly June to August 2014, 3D laser scanning of crime scenes, drone pictures, and of course open source evidence and also battlefield evidence, with the ardent desire and the intention not just to collect and preserve it, but to ensure that it feeds into courts where fair trials are possible in accordance with international standards, so that a record can be created that will stand the test of time. The law is important. It's really the area that UNITAD is focusing on. President Barham Salih last November, before the protests and all the other problems that everyone's familiar with, created a bit of an impasse. But it's important for UNITAD, for the victims, that the crimes are properly acknowledged as genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. If we don't call it what it is, if independent judges don't determine what is the proper labeling, we're not going to really properly prevent the same thing happening again. So really, I'm delighted, Parry, to be with you today, to stand in solidarity and to really tell not just you, but all Yazidis that your perseverance has been listened to by the international community, and that a day will come, God willing, that the collective capacity of the international community, we have a distinguished prosecutor here from Germany, we have Michelle Jarvis from the IIIM, UNITAD is there. States, we have massive support from the United States of America, the United Kingdom, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, United Arab Emirates, the list goes on. This collective, stubborn insistence that the crimes must be catalogued, must be exposed, and the ideology debunked is what will allow us to achieve the promise that has been made to you, the members of the Yazidi community, that justice will be taken off the page of a promise of a resolution or another agreement, and will result in something that you all will realize that your lives mattered then and they matter today. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ASG Karim Khan. We go to the next panelist, Ms. Michelle Jarvis, is the deputy head of the International Impartial and Independent Mechanism for Syria. As we know, many of the crimes against the Yazidi community, especially Yazidi women and children, happened in Syrian territory. Ms. Jarvis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Parry, and let me add my thanks to you and the organisers for the event today, for this opportunity to be part of the discussion. Today, 6 years after the attack on Sinjar, we know that the harms against the Yazidi community are very far from over. We've heard that reflected in your remarks and in Karim's remarks just now. We know that there are many Yazidis still missing, still living in camps, and still very much traumatised by the horrors that they've suffered. We know many children have been orphaned, and we know that the rebuilding of Sinjar is still something that very much lies ahead. So the priorities for action for the Yazidi community are, of course, vast and pressing, and I think this was very eloquently set out in the statement that the Free Yezidi Foundation made for the commemoration of the 6-year anniversary of the genocide. But of course, among these pressing priorities is justice. And the Yazidi community has identified justice as an essential tool for healing through recognition of harms done, through punishment of the perpetrators, and by, of course, establishing that incontrovertible historical record of what has happened. Nobody is under any illusions that justice will be quick or easy. But again, very much reflecting the comments already made, we know that we cannot give up on the idea of justice. It's understandable for those most affected that the slow progress can cause disillusionment. We know that. But we also know from past experience that with persistence, more may be possible than we dare to believe when we start out on the very rocky quest for justice. I've seen that firsthand in my own experience as a war crimes prosecutor working on justice for victims of crimes committed in the Balkans conflicts. So my message today, again, very much resonating with everything that has already been said so far, is a message of collective persistence. We have to keep focused on determined strategies for addressing the obstacles we face. The International Impartial and Independent Mechanism, the IIIM as we call it, has a role to play in this process. The IIIM is essentially a justice facilitator, and we're working hard to create solid foundations for justice, both in the short and the long term. We'll have the chance to speak a little bit more later on about the IIIM's specific mandate and the opportunities that it presents to contribute to addressing crimes against Yazidis. But for now, I just want to highlight three things. First of all, we should not lose sight of the fact that the IIIM's very creation represents a strong and determined statement of commitment to accountability for crimes committed in Syria, including those against the Yazidis. With seemingly all roads to justice blocked politically, the vast majority of UN General Assembly member states stepped in to support the mechanism's creation, a signal that despite the obstacles, justice could not and would not be taken off the international agenda. Second, we can start to see more clearly the opportunities that come from the very accountability blockages that we face. The fact that we don't yet have an international court or tribunal dedicated to accountability for crimes in Syria, including those against the Yazidis, means we've had to be a lot more strategic in our approach. And we've had to approach justice from the beginning with the idea that it must be a coordinated collective effort across many different actors and many different justice pathways. 2 years after becoming operational, the scope that we see for the IIIM to contribute and support to give support to coordinated, meaningful accountability action has far exceeded our initial expectations. And third, if justice is to be inclusive, we have to keep working to make sure that the stigma of crimes committed against the Yazidis is placed firmly on the perpetrators where it belongs. Here too, we see positive signs of progress in the growing support and empathy expressed towards victims and survivors of rape, enslavement, and other forms of sexual violence. Justice for Yazidi women and girls has to be a central component of justice for the Yazidis. But we cannot succeed in this unless we create the right conditions for them to speak out about the harms that they have suffered. We know we have a long way to go to achieve meaningful justice, but we also know exactly what we have to do to get ready. Time is certainly marching, but the foundations of justice are being put in place, and we have the opportunity to keep doing more. And that's an opportunity that we have to make the most of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jarvis. I'll go to the next panelist, Mr. Christian Richer. He is a federal prosecutor and head of Germany's War Crimes Unit. This is where the prosecutions against ISIS perpetrators have been made, and we Yazidis are very, very grateful for Mr. Richer's proactive role in Germany so far. Mr. Richer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pari. Thank you, distinguished guests. I'm very honored as well to be part of this commemoration today, of this event today, and on the day of the 6th anniversary of the genocide against the Yazidi population in Iraq and Syria. Today, of course, is a day of remembrance and of mourning, but it's as well a day that reminds us of the justice that has to be done, and the day of the accountability of the most of the perpetrators who made these attacks against the Yazidi population in the countries, in the respective countries. Well, the Office of the Federal Public Prosecutor General in Germany has, on the legal basis of the principle of universality, the opportunity and the obligation, of course, to investigate and to prosecute those who are responsible for the attacks against the Yazidi population, the ISIS fighters, especially those who are here in the country, and all the ones who we can get hands on. This is what we did right from the beginning, and we felt responsible for this even in the year 2014. On 4th of August, we started our structural case against ISIS members for war crimes and crimes against humanity, for genocide, for international war crimes. And very soon, the main focus was directed on the attacks on the Yazidi population. What took place some days after. From now up to now, we received 4 arrest warrants against known perpetrators. 3 of them are still at large. 1 person is in custody at the moment, and 4 more persons are currently in trial for attacks against Yazidi, for slaveholding, and even for genocide. I will come to that later on. We started our structural investigation by taking the chance to interview those Yazidi people, mostly women and children, who came to Germany in the months after the attacks from 2015 on. About 1,000 people came to Germany on basis of a special program to have medical help for the most harmed people. And we came in contact with a responsible ministry in order to interview these people, all these women and children, or at least as many of them as we can interview. Up to now, we interviewed about 100 women and children, some men. The first of all of them was the mayor of Kocho, Naif Mato, on 10th of June in 2015, and from that day on, we continuously interviewed people in order to get the whole picture of what happened to the genocide to the Yazidi population during this genocide. Later on, we received the first arrest warrant against one namely known suspect of ISIS for not only for war crimes and crimes against humanity, but even for genocide. What is, at least as far as I know, the first arrest warrant against a perpetrator for genocide against the Yazidi population of Iraq and Syria. As I told you, up to now, about 100 people were interviewed, and we will not rest. We will go on and continue with this over the time. As you probably know, there's no such a thing as a statute of limitation for genocide, so we will not hesitate to go on with our investigation and prosecution as long as there might be fighters who are still alive, and to hold them responsible, even if it takes years and years. we will be, as the war crimes unit of the Federal Public Prosecutor General in Germany, with our partners internationally, our international partners like III, Michel Jarvis, of course, like UTAD with Karim Khan and others, national prosecutorial agencies and NGOs like Free Yezidi Foundation. We will continue with this to bring justice to the responsible persons and to bring them to justice and to show the Yazidi population worldwide that they are not alone, and we will go on to punish these perpetrators. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richard. Now to the last panelist, Ms. Susan Notar. She is a lawyer and senior advisor in the United States Department of State Office for Global Criminal Justice. She has been following the Yazidi crisis since the beginning, and her office provides significant funding to help investigate some of these crimes. Ms. Notar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pari, and thank you to you and the Free Yezidi Foundation, not only for this event today, commemorating the tragedy of what happened to the Yazidi people, but also your leadership in a way to move forward for helping the Yazidi people survive and thrive past it. This event is very personally meaningful to me because in 2014, I served as the lead for gender issues, religious and ethnic minorities, and the rule of law while on the Iraq desk at the State Department. I was actually in Baghdad in June 2014 when Mosul fell, and then shortly returned and Mosul fell. And I think it's important to talk about the fact that the Yazidi terror did not begin in August, but actually in June of 2014. And we began to receive messages from Yazidis and other people about torture and abuses that were occurring to them and their families. This, of course, culminated in the terrible events of August 3rd. After that, we began nearly daily meeting with members of the Yazidi community in the United States, and they were describing what had happened to them and their families. We began to report this to the White House and to members of Congress and other members of the American public who were deeply distraught by what was happening to the Yazidi people. For the past several years, I have served in the Office of Global Criminal Justice. We are a small but mighty team working to hold perpetrators of atrocities accountable throughout the world. In 2017, the Secretary of State declared that ISIS was responsible for genocide against the Yazidis, Christians, in areas that ISIS controlled or had controlled, and humanity and ethnic cleansing against them as well. This was a very historic announcement because the Secretary of State has only made a genocide announcement 5 times in the history of the United States. My colleagues and I at the State Department have been working to hold ISIS accountable in a variety of ways, including for its enslavement of women and girls. My office has provided UNITAD with $1 million to work on its continuing collection and preservation and storing of evidence, particularly in the Nineveh Plains. My colleagues in the Office of Near Eastern Affairs provided $2 million to UNITAD to begin the first exhumations of mass graves in the Sinjar region. Our office has also provided funding to grantees to help them collect evidence, interview victims, and to help digitize the vast reams of evidence that are available. One of our grantees is actually provided information that was helpful to our colleague from Germany. In addition to the collection of forensic evidence and engaging the Yazidi communities and families of the missing in that process, My colleagues in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights of Labor have provided emergency assistance to hundreds of former Yazidi captives and survivors of sexual violence to assist with the reintegration and support and their immediate legal and psychological needs. My colleagues in the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration have helped provide psychological and livelihoods assistance to victims of ISIS captivity, many of whom are now widows. And then finally, the Defeat ISIS Coalition has regularly supported the work of UNITAD, including last year when it hosted 2 high-level coalition events on ISIS accountability featuring Mr. Khan and the Nobel Peace Prize recipient Nadia Murad. The coalition continues to urge other nations to provide either monetary or staff support to UNITAD. It is clear, and you've heard this from the other speakers today, that accountability, the quest for accountability is not a quick or simple one. For folks who are watching at home today, the Free Yazidi Foundation has developed an excellent brochure on accountability, including explaining the rights to victims on accountability and the fact that providing statements does not necessarily mean a lawsuit will be brought on their behalf, but it is necessarily a crucial step. Pursuing accountability and naming the perpetrators is vitally important to hold those responsible accountable, possibly deter future atrocities, and create an important record of what happened to the victims and their families. Through this record, we can honor all those who are no longer here or who remain missing. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Ms. Notar. I want to thank all the panelists for their statements and for the hard work that they're doing. The Yazidi community very much appreciates your effort and your dedication. I will now turn the conversation over to Ms. Sarita Asraf. She will moderate the questions and answers with our guests. Ms. Sarita is an international lawyer and a barrister in the United Kingdom. She has worked on the UN Commission of Inquiry of Syria and for UNITAD, and also runs Atlas, which is a network for women working in international law. She is currently the head of the FYF legal team, and I'm very happy with that. Sarita, the floor is yours. Sarita, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm still getting a hang of Zoom. I'm saying thank you, Parry, and good morning and good afternoon to our distinguished panelists and to those who are joining us virtually today. I'm very glad to be moderating such a high-level and expert panel. I want to move swiftly and start with the first question to Mr. Karim Khan, who is the head of UNITAD, to ask the question, which is really the dominant question on most of the Yazidis' minds that I have spoken to in the past 6 years. And that is, how long will justice take? And is the pandemic going to lengthen the path to justice for the Yazidis?
Thanks so much, Sarita. COVID-19 doesn't help anybody. It hardly facilitates the work of UNITAD, but what we're trying to do and what we've done is to try to look at new modalities of working, using technology, leveraging that so that we can actually even increase the work rate. We've rolled out an app, and we're going to ask also the Free Yazidi organization, Yazidi, and other actors to help us spread it so that different diverse communities, whether they're in Germany or Australia or in Iraq, they can use that. So it's not a thing, but it's not. It's an opportunity to look at new ways of doing things so that we can keep moving the dial and fulfill the objectives set out in the mandate from the Security Council. In terms of the first part of the question, we're making up for lost time. You know, the crimes that we're commemorating today started for the Yezidi people 6 years ago. We've been on the ground for 22 months. So we're trying to make up for lost time, and I've highlighted already some of the work that UNITAD has been conducting. We've already fed into Finland. We're working with Iraqi judges to create dossiers ready for genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, so that when the law is passed, hopefully in Iraq, where the vast majority of suspects are held, there can be proper accountability. But I would recall what Christian mentioned. There's no statute of limitations for war crimes. There should not be impunity, and the crimes are so egregious that the international community must have the stamina to do what is necessary to ensure that the rights of every victim group is vindicated. My hope is that this year, in direct terms, this year, maybe October, November, the government of Iraq, the new government of Iraq, can pass a key piece of legislation that will allow Iraq to prosecute the acts of Daesh as international crimes. And I think that would start a really new dawn in terms of an evidence-based fair trial record that will expose the criminality of Daesh.
Thank you. And as you know from your outreach events, the Yazidi and other survivor communities in Iraq have very high hopes for UNITAD and its work. What can they do, both Yazidis and others in Iraq and those abroad, do to better support UNITAD's building of case dossiers against the perpetrators of these crimes?
The victim communities, the Yezidis all over, are vital partners. So it's to keep engaging with UNITAD, both directly, I mentioned the application that we're rolling out, but also through whether it's the Free Yazidi organization or YASTRA or the Yazidi Documentation Center, or to keep insisting on your rights. So keep being strong, keep being patient, keep being insistent, demand justice, not as a favor of the international community to you, but as a right that you have by virtue of your humanity. And I think that vindication of your rights will keep all of us honest. The collective promise that the Security Council has made to you as survivor communities, to those that are no longer here, can be fulfilled. But it requires that stubborn, insistent unity of purpose. So really more of the same, I'm afraid. And I think if we do that, hopefully there can be that day in which this record, in whichever court, whether it's in courts in Germany or courts in Iraq, but where by dint of fair trials, a record can be made to show the courageous humanity, the bravery of the Yazidi people, and the full perversion and depravity of Daesh and the un-Islamic ideology that they postulated.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I was wondering, just, I know you may have to step out a few minutes early because of other commitments. I was wondering, in a year's time from now, what do you hope to be able to say about justice and accountability for crimes against the Yazidis?
You know, what I would want is to show progress. And for us, the survivor communities today, it's most importantly the Yazidis, marking the 6th anniversary, that we are doing what it says on the tin. We are here to promote accountability for the acts of Daesh. And so that the best assessment is that, do the Yazidi community think that we're working with sincerity, with diligence, with as much professionalism as possible, so that we are moving forward for accountability. I would go back, I hope this year we could have a law in Iraq. Of course, it's not down to the United Nations, it's down to a sovereign government. And if we get that law, I very much hope that cases can be, this time next year, cases can be before that court, in which the crimes can be properly labeled, and by way of a juridical decision, the evidence gathered by the Iraqi authorities, independently gathered by UNITAD, can be subjected to critique and analysis, and we can hear definitively whether or not cases are proved for genocide, crimes against humanity, or war crimes, and proved beyond reasonable doubt. And I think that's the real hope that we have in terms of the accountability aspect of UNITAD.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Mr. Karim Khan. I want to turn now to Michelle Jarvis, who is the Deputy Head of the IIIM, which relates to the crimes committed in Syria. when people think of ISIS's attack on the Yazidis, they tend to think of Iraq, obviously of Sinjar, and of the Yazidi survivors who are currently living mainly in and around Duhok. Would you give us an insight into the unique role of the IIIM in developing a fuller understanding of the crimes against the Yazidis who were transferred into Syria?
Thank you, Sarita. Yeah, this is a really important question because it is just so important for so many reasons that we don't compartmentalize the crimes that have been committed. And of course, where you're dealing with a transfer of victims across a border, a state border, it can, excuse me, it can be very easy to fall into the trap of focusing on what's happened in Iraq or focusing separately on what's happened in Syria. But we know that in terms of the classification of the crimes, and especially in putting together a case on a crime like genocide, it is so important that we keep a holistic picture of what has happened and understand the connections between the crimes that have been committed in Iraq and in Syria. So this is very much what we are mindful of in our work at the IIIM. And I want to just pause there to say a little bit about the mandate of the IIIM and the opportunities that we have to address the crimes that have been committed against the Yazidis. So I think many people will know that the IIIM mandate is quite a broad and general one, where we've been directed to address crimes committed in Syria from March 2011 onwards. So of course, this covers a vast amount of conduct, a vast amount of crimes that have been committed involving many, many different parties. But the crimes committed against the Yazidis form part of this because we know that there have been aspects of those crimes committed on Syrian territory. The Commission of Inquiry for Syria, in their report on the Yazidi genocide, documents very helpfully those aspects of the crimes that have taken part on Syrian territory. And based on that information, we understand that thousands of Yazidis have been captured and held in Syria. And I'll talk a little bit more about the details of that later on. So that opens up the question of what can the IIIM do, given its broad mandate with the opportunity to focus also on Yazidi crimes. Well, there are really a few key aspects of our work that I wanted to highlight to give an understanding of how it is that we're moving forward to incorporate crimes against the Yazidis and addressing those crimes in the work that we do. One of our key objectives, of course, is to create a comprehensive central repository of information and evidence of crimes committed in Syria. And the idea is really that the IIIM can put together this resource that can be used to facilitate, as I said before, justice in many different ways and across many different jurisdictions. Some of those opportunities exist now, and some of them we hope will exist in the future as well if additional jurisdictional pathways open up, and we have to keep working on that. So we enter into cooperation frameworks with providers of information and evidence. These are groups, civil society actors who've been working often for many years in documenting these crimes. We currently have 3 cooperation agreements with groups, organisations who are working on documenting crimes committed against the Yazidis. And we have negotiations with 3 other organisations underway or anticipated in the near future. So you can see that with this network of information providers, we're able to increasingly seek to make targeted requests for information and evidence to ensure the value and the integrity of our evidence collection. And then, of course, based on these cooperation agreements, we've moved forward with actually collecting information and evidence to hold and preserve as part of our central repository. And it's really broad, the categories of information and evidence that we've been able to take in and that we're interested in. We're interested in videos, communication records, witness statements, photographs, and even analytical work that might have been done by these other actors. This all helps to allow us to create a picture of the events that have happened and to prioritise our own analytical work for accountability purposes. We're very much seeking to avoid re-traumatisation of witnesses, so we don't move to immediately re-interview witnesses who've been interviewed by others. but we are able to use our own investigative mandate as well to fill gaps that we do see in the evidence that's been collected by others. We'll certainly continue to pursue cooperation frameworks with actors who are working on Yazidi crimes, and we really welcome contact from actors who are not already in touch with the IIIM. It's very easy to get in touch with us. There's no special requirements, and we're really open to expanding our ability to access the broad range of documentation that exists. We, of course, also are working on analysis. So this is the part of our mandate that focuses on building criminal law case files that can support accountability efforts now and in the future. We're working under criminal law standards. We're working especially on linking specific crimes to particular perpetrators. Thirdly, of course, what is important for us and where we see the opportunities to really add value today is the support that we're providing to national war crimes units. So national jurisdictions can make requests for assistance to the mechanism, and we can assist them in a broad range of ways by providing information and evidence, by providing expertise, by providing our own analytical work product that they can fit into their cases and investigations that they have ongoing. So we currently have 2 requests for assistance that relate either directly or indirectly to crimes committed against the Yazidis, and we anticipate 2 additional requests coming in by September this year. So you can see it's building and growing at a fairly rapid pace. So really, I just wanted to emphasise the number of ways in which the IIIM has an ability to support, to facilitate and to promote coordination in the accountability efforts currently underway, while we at the same time prepare for future justice opportunities as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly useful, and I'm sure for particularly the Yazidi audience hearing this, they will find that to be very useful information to them. I wanted to turn to ask you about the issue of gendered investigations and analysis of the crimes against the Yazidis. As you will know, most of the entities working on justice for the Yazidis, and I think also broadly justice in relation to crimes committed against other communities as well as crimes committed in Syria, have emphasized the importance of a gendered approach to investigations and analysis. This is an issue that you've championed for many years, including during your time as the Deputy Prosecutor at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. For the justice actors who are listening today, how can they meaningfully put into practice a gendered approach beyond a focus on the investigation of crimes of sexual violence?
Yeah, thanks for raising this, Sarita. It's such an important point. And as I mentioned in my introductory remarks as well, it really is so crucial that we keep justice for all victims who've been affected as part of the justice equation. And that includes, of course, the women and girls, as well as the men and the boys. Certainly it's difficult to answer this question in a short amount of time. I mean, we could, of course, spend many hours trying to talk about the strategies that we've tested, the things that have worked, the things that haven't. It is a challenge, but it is, I think, something where we know we can make progress if we're really putting in place dedicated, proactive strategies. We've seen that from past experience as well. I think we can help if we're clear about what we mean by a gendered approach, and to be really able to articulate how does that help us strengthen justice outcomes. So as you say, Sarita, it's about much more than prosecuting sexual violence crimes. Nowadays, I think we have a much better, at least theoretical, understanding of the fact that conflict and conflict-related atrocities have a very different impact on the victims depending on gender factors. For example, we see that very clearly in the crimes that have been committed against the Yezidi people following the attack on Sinjar. And again, I'm referring to the findings in the Commission of Inquiry's report, which set it out so clearly. So we saw the older Yazidi males being separated from the females and the young boys and killed, subjected to forced conversion and forced labour. We saw Yazidi boys aged 7 and above who were transferred into Syria, being sent to training camps and then used to fight in the hostilities in Syria. And we saw ISIL transporting multiple groups of women and girls, 300 at a time, into Syria for sale to ISIL fighters. They were, of course, sold to individual fighters, sold in slave markets, including online slave markets, and subjected to brutal rape and other sexual violence, as well as forced domestic labour and a whole host of other abuses. So these crimes have been devastating for everybody caught up in them, but there are very much gendered aspects to it. And that's so important that we bring that out in the documentation that we do and the case files that we build. And I do just want to sound a note of caution here about the importance of not being misled into thinking that because the terrible things that happen to the women and the girls in the Yazidi community have assumed a fairly high profile in media discussions of the crimes against the Yazidis, we shouldn't assume that they will automatically be reflected in the justice efforts that are ongoing. We've seen a very strange paradox historically where often the suffering of women and girls has been used to underscore the outrageous conduct on the part of a party to a conflict. But strangely, those voices drop out almost entirely when it comes to accountability efforts. So we have to have strategies to correct the tendency for that to happen. I think there are a whole range of questions that we need to be asking as we go through our work. One is, how is gender driving the violence that's being inflicted? Are the perpetrators' objectives linked to the gender of the victims? And if so, how do we bring that out in the cases that we prosecute? We want to know the ways that gender has influenced the harms that have been inflicted. So even for a crime like sexual violence, which can of course affect both men and women, males and females, the form that it takes and the impact on the victim is often very different depending on gender factors. So these are not gender neutral. There's always that gender element to be understood and reflected in the work that we do. And most importantly as well, I think it's taken us as a profession a long time to understand that our own gender biases very much influence the priorities that we have when we go about our work. So we have to ask that question about whether we're overlooking certain experiences due to gender bias or gender factors. Are we over prioritizing certain categories of crimes because of those gendered biases? And then finally, really understanding how does gender play into the barriers that we experience when we're trying to collect evidence and document crimes? Are the victims being inhibited or prevented from coming forward to give evidence because of gendered factors? So it's complex, but it's absolutely crucial if we're going to have any kind of inclusive justice. So at the AAAM, we've been working from the commencement of the mechanism to really try and test strategies and put in place a comprehensive gender strategy to help us navigate these very many factors.
Thank you for that. That was incredibly illuminating. And as you said, something that we could probably discuss for hours, if not days. But thank you for that. That was incredibly clear and helpful. I want to just turn now to the German federal prosecutor, Mr. Christian Richter. Germany has been one of the centers for the prosecutions of ISIL crimes against the Yezidis. And I know there are several actually active ongoing cases in the courts in Germany right now. Would you give us some insights into how the investigations are being built by the German Federal Prosecutor's Office? And what are some of the challenges that you face?
Thank you, Sarita. A very interesting question. I try to explain a little bit what is going on in Germany concerning our investigation and prosecution. Currently, as I told you, there are, I think, 4 ongoing trials in Germany. 2 are under the main aspect of international war crimes, and 2 are on the main aspect of membership in a terrorist organization, but with a very strong aspect on international war crimes against Yazidi people. Our investigation normally start with some indications which we receive from different directions. Of course, a very important pool of indications, information is the structural case concerning the attacks against the Yazidi, where we, as I told you, interviewed by now about 100 persons, and lots of them give very concrete indications on certain suspects, on certain perpetrators, members of ISIS. Another source are, in fact, indications of the returning foreign fighters. Some of them were telling us that others were, for example, holding slaves, Yazidi slaves, for sexual slaves or just slaves for householding. And this is a source for us as well. These are the moments where we start formal investigations, where we are starting formal cases against known suspects, namely known suspects. Of course, indications of NGOs are important as well. We collect a lot of evidence from NGOs like Free Yazidi Foundation and other Yazidi organizations, but from other organizations of civil society like Sinjar, for example, as well. And we receive additional information, of course, from IIIM. Michel Jarvis knows this, and then from UNITAD, of course, as well. When we were starting or had started a case, a formal case, then of course we put all the indications together, all the pieces of evidence. Important parts are normally expert witnesses who tell us about the general situation, and documents we receive from other institutions and from other national prosecutorial agencies. We, as you probably know, we are closely working together on the level of Eurojust in the Genocide Network meeting, what is a very useful institution for the collecting of evidence and for the exchange of information. And whenever we have strong suspicion, then we apply for an arrest warrant, and we are mostly successful. And then when we get hands on the suspect under German law, if this is necessary, then we make an indictment, and then it goes to court. As I told you, we have 4 ongoing trials at the moment where Yazidi women are very important witnesses. One is still going on in Düsseldorf with one Yazidi woman who testified several days, and one is going on in Frankfurt, where another Yazidi woman is going to testify again on the upcoming Thursday. Some of the problems we face, the challenges we face, I want to tell you, one challenge is the identification of a suspect. A lot of witnesses tell us about here in Germany, for example, under the refugee community, they say, we met one of our perpetrators, and we saw him again, and we identified him, and then it's up to us, of course, to see if we can identify this person. This is very difficult, and in fact, we had some cases where we finally saw that the person who was recognized as one of the perpetrators, in fact, was unable to be the real perpetrator, because the person was of a completely different nationality. Yeah? But this is something, nevertheless, it's important we go after every trace we get, and every time we try to identify the potential suspect. Another challenge we face, of course, are witnesses who are still in Iraq or in Syria. It is always important for us to get as close as we can to the witnesses, to the piece of evidence, what is as close as possible to the incident, to the crime itself, and most of them are witnesses. And we try to establish, and we are very hopeful, and we are sure that this will happen, and then we'll work to establish continuous cooperation with UNITAD and with IIIM as well, but especially with UNITAD based in Baghdad, in order to interview witnesses in Iraq and to get a good access to the population, the Yazidi population in Iraq. As I told you, we have already a very established cooperation with the competent authorities in Germany to interview the witnesses we are interested in, and the ones who can tell us what happened. And but the challenge is to have this abroad as well.
Thank you so much. Could you just mention very briefly what the Yazidi community, especially in Germany, can help to do to support the work of your office?
Yeah, the Yazidi community, well, the most important thing is that they should have no fear to cooperate with us. It is our duty to investigate and our obligation to prosecute the responsible people for this, what happened against the Yazidi. So it's crucial for us to interview the victims. It is crucial for us to interview every witness who can tell us what happened. We have a good experience now. We have built up a team of female experts, like police officers, like prosecutors, even interpreters, who are very experienced in doing this. So I think it is mostly known in the Yazidi community here in Germany that there is no harm in testifying and in telling what happened. We are most interested in the whole picture, and we do not force anybody to tell things what the person does not want to tell us, especially about sexual violence, experiences of sexual violence. We don't need every detail. But anyway, we try to interview the people because we need the knowledge. And in the trial, then we try to work as much as we can with expert witnesses or with police investigators who tell us what the witnesses told them. And only the most important witnesses have to testify in court. But even in court, it is not a problem. I think the witnesses who have made the experience to testify in a German court in such a case have no bad experience in doing this. Of course, defense lawyers sometimes try to challenge them, but in the end, the court, the judges, and us as well, the prosecutors, always protect them. And there's a witness protection program as well in Germany. So the motivation to testify is to explain what happened there and to give the justice, and therefore to cooperate with us.
Thank you so much. That's very useful. And I hope that the Yazidi community that is listening have taken note of what you've said. I want to turn now quickly to Ms. Susan Notar, who is from the from the US government Department of Global Criminal Justice, her senior advisor there. The United States has, since 2014, been a tremendous and consistent supporter of those working on the Yazidi community and those working on accountability for the crimes committed by ISIL against the Yazidis and other communities. Can you tell us a bit more about the US government's support, including its support of efforts around accountability, and why has this been such a priority for the United States?
Yeah, thank you, Sarita. And again, thank you for inviting me to be on this panel today, Pari. I think we can see the US support and really that of the international community going back to August 7th of 2014, when the US, at the request of the Iraqi government, began bombing ISIS and delivering humanitarian assistance to the people who were trapped on Sinjar Mountain. Really, the effort of the U.S. and the entire community has really lasted that entire time, and I think we see it in some of the work that I described earlier, with really multi-millions of dollars of assistance that have come from the U.S. government, from various entities, as well as the Defeat ISIS coalition, which helped to draw back the territorial occupation of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. As in terms of accountability, I think many of us, and certainly many of us who work on accountability on a daily basis, we view it as it's the right thing to do. And so I think that's the bottom line. And part of our work, I think, is, as we've all described today, it's not easy and it takes a long time. So you really have to be committed to it and committed to the Yazidi people and the other people who suffered. But I think it's also the larger goal is really to help. It's truth-telling. It's some of the work that we describe related to transitional justice as well. So it's truth-telling. It's hopefully bringing some peace to people and their families who have suffered terribly. It's putting an end to violence. It's, some of the lawsuits that we've described, which is an incredibly important component. Part of our work and my work at the State Department is to make sure these issues are still in our leadership's attention, because there's many crises all around the world. And so it's very important that just because there's a new crisis, we don't lose sight of, the ongoing work that still needs to be done, whether it's humanitarian assistance for people remaining in IDP camps, or helping the victims of sexual enslavement who still need psychological assistance and livelihoods training, or those of us who are international lawyers working on the accountability sphere. So I think it's a kind of a multi-pronged effort that we are committed to.
Thank you so much. We're in the final minutes of the panel now, but I did want to give all the panelists the chance to give a very brief answer to our one last question, which is that this is an anniversary, a very tragic anniversary we'll be commemorating for many years to come, and for many of us, I think, for the rest of our lives. This time next year, what do you hope to be able to say about justice and accountability for ISIL crimes against the Yazidis? If you have, I'm going to give you all the panelists here about 30 seconds to answer that incredibly challenging question. I don't know if Susan, if we want to start with you and then move backwards to the panelists.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much. I'll be very brief. So I think some of the work that I just mentioned, I think, is incredibly important. I'd love to see more lawsuits. As a lawyer, I'd love to see, because I think it is incredibly important. I'd love to see more lawsuits in some of the nations that do not currently have war crime statutes, to have those statutes on the books, because it would be incredibly meaningful, I think, for some of our Yazidi victims to have not just the anti-terrorism lawsuit, but actually the core international crimes. And I'll end there.
Thank you. And Mr. Richer.
Yeah, what I'd like to see is the first conviction for genocide against Yazidi, and then during the next year, one trial in Frankfurt is on this topic, and I really hope that we will receive a conviction for genocide, and this would be, I think, this would be a strong sign for the Yazidi community as well, that it is acknowledged as a genocide what happened to the Yazidi in 2014.
Thank you. And then finally from you, Michelle.
Thanks, Sarita. And I can only endorse what Christian said then about the importance of those judicial precedents and confirmation of the harms being done I'll pick up also on something Karim said before he left. I think you asked him a similar question. He said, we want to see progress. And I think that's true for all of us, especially with some of these newer, more creative mandates that have been set up. We're very much experimenting with methods and procedures and trying to find those avenues to really have immediate impact while we prepare for the longer term. So we're wanting to see that those initial steps that we're taking are really coming to fruition with positive impact. But it's not just progress we're looking for, it's progress towards justice that's meaningful for the Yazidi community itself. And that's where a victim and survivor centered approach is just so important in everything that we're doing. It's not about justice that's meaningful in my view, or meaningful in the UN's view, or the international community's view. It's about what is meaningful for those most affected. So we really hope at the IIIM that the Yazidi community, the civil society actors will continue to engage with us, increase their engagement with us, and really help us understand what it is that is most important, how you want us to move forward on this justice and accountability challenge that we are all on together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so ends the FYF panel on justice and accountability. I want to thank all of our panelists and also for the audience for joining us. And of course, Parry, of course, is Executive Director of the Free Yazidi Foundation. Thank you, everyone. And for those of you who are watching and listening online, please stay on because we have another excellent panel just after this one.
Thank you so much.